Now we're up to upgrading components, and this is the most exciting part because we get to see the little decisions that the team's made into what changes they think make sense in the components, and it also allows us to learn a few new things about View 3 along the way. The first thing they're pointing out is the difference in V-model, which I'm pretty sure we've already covered, so I'm going to scroll down now. And the other thing is View 3 scope slots. So if there's anywhere that you're using the Options API, and saying this $$ scope slots, that can now be replaced with this $$ slots. I'll do a quick search within my project, but I'm pretty sure I'm not using scope slots at all. No, this is an easy one anyway, so that's not as big a deal. All right, so that doesn't matter. And the reason is because they've now been combined. So in the new version of View 3, scope slots is now sitting within slots. They're all sitting within one object. Okay, so another way to say this is that $ slots still contains what it always did, but it also contains what scope slots used to contain. So now we only need to use $ slots. Cool. All right, so you can go ahead and fix that if it makes sense for you. Moving on. Oh, actually, before we get started, I want to install Jeff's linter. So Jeff is someone on the team who's like a champion of extensions. He's the guy that created QCalendar, and he actually created a project called ESLint Plugin Quasar. So let's look for ESLint-plugin-Quasar. Here it is here. And we're going to go ahead and install this because it's basically going to let us know if we're using parts of the API that aren't actually available to us. We'll get like a yellow squiggly line and some errors in the console, which is so handy, especially when you're upgrading. Therefore, I'm going to come down here. Let's just get out a full screen, whack that on the side, and go ahead and install this plugin. So first we just say yarn add dev. By the way, if you're not using a linter, you can skip all of this. It's definitely worth installing though if you do use a linter. And now let's say .eslint rc. We're going to jump into there, look for the plugin section, and it's telling us to whack that in. Okay, so I've just completed this step. V1.7, we're not using 0.17. We're using version 1 plus, that's us. So now we go to the extend section. Here it is here. And we paste this line of code in. There we go. And now in the rules section, we have this. So let's go to rules. And I might just add a comment above this saying linting for Quasar. And add another comma there. And I think that's it. We should be good to go then. Let's close down our server and run it again. And hopefully we'll get some errors. Ha! It works! How cool is that? So now we're even picking up errors in our Quasar components. So if our Quasar components are using properties that they shouldn't be using, then that's going to show up as an error, and it's going to show up in our linter as well. In fact, I'll show you an example of this. If we go to our main layout, notice that I've got content-class here. We get this red squiggly line to let us know that content class isn't actually a property. And you'll notice that in the upgrade guide, if I just copy that, actually that's the next step here. Use class and style instead of content class and content style. So the linter has picked up on that for us. So now we can go ahead and change this to just class. And now I'm actually going to disable the linter now. And the reason I'm going to disable it is because I want to go through things one at a time using the upgrade guide. And I can't really do that if I have all of these linting errors here. So I don't know the best way to do this. Maybe if I just comment out the rules. I'm not exactly an ESLint pro. And maybe comment out the plugin. I'll comment out all of that and maybe just enable it again when I've finished upgrading so that it can catch anything that we might have missed. Really cool. And by the way, I recommend you use this even when you're done upgrading, just so that you get that extra feedback while you're coding. It's super handy. Cool. All right, so we're back to normal now. So let's go ahead and finish this step, and we'll search for content-class. Find in folder. Let me just go ahead and hide the console there. I'm going to search for content-class. Here's one area that I'm using it. And so queue dialog, content-class, now becomes class. Save that. And let me just show you what that did. I'll bring that back to normal. If we come here to get started, notice that we've got a clear background here. What I did to demonstrate this is that we actually get a background with a bit of a blue color. So refresh the page. Let me see if that's working now. Yeah, so it's kind of a silly example, but I just wanted to show you that we can change content-class to class to get that working. All right, so the other one is style-class, and it looks like I'm not using that at all, so we can go ahead and move on. Next is a breadcrumbs related one, and I don't think I'm using breadcrumbs. No, I'm not. However, the update itself actually applies to a lot of things in the application. So it's saying removed append, the append property, and that's basically from anything view router related. I'll show you what I mean. So here we go. In index.view, I'm using the word append here. So there's a button called get started. And by saying append, basically what I'm doing is saying go to the current route / to don't in this example. Let me show you what I mean. So if we go to don't and we go to home page, this get started button aligns with this button here. So what used to happen is since it says pages up here, let me just paste that in there. What it would do is take you to the current website / pages and just append to don't onto the end there. Now, since append has now been deprecated, it's no longer appending it. It's just going straight to the to don't route. So that's something that I need to fix now. And by the way, the docs say that they removed it because append wasn't used very often, which I think is fair enough. And in my eyes, it feels like a pretty dangerous way to navigate around your application using append. And the reason is, if I was using append in order to get to this route, I can't move this button to a different part of my application. Let's just say we're at a different page on our application, which is /posts. So we go to, so we're on /posts, and then we click on this button. It would take us to posts / to don't, which is the wrong route. So it means that this button is no longer transportable. So I thought the append thing was a little bit nuts to use anyway. So what we're going to do now is just a very simple fix. We'll change that to /pages / to don't. And I believe it's the same fix down here. Yeah, here we go. /pages / horizontal to don'ts. And let's remove the append prop, get rid of this comment here, and see if all of that works. Search that again. Yeah, it's not there anymore. Get started works, and then get started horizontally should also work. And it does. Moving on. Okay, so the queue chat message. Right, this is a smart move by Quasar. It's dangerous to display data from a third-party source. You should probably know this already. If you don't, that's fine. But if, for example, somebody sends you a message in a chat that has HTML code in it, you want to make sure that you're not running that HTML code because it might have script tags in there and all sorts of nasty stuff like that that can basically hijack your application and do malicious things. This is very important, so I'm actually going to give you an example of this. Let's go back to get started. This is my cool little chatbot thing. And now check this out. Let's imagine that I run some code and I say document.getElement by ID send button. And I think that's actually going to show up as nothing. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this button here. Let's search for the word bot. And where is that button? Q-. Yeah, this is the send button. So that's this button here. And I'm going to give it an ID equal to send button. All right, so if I run that code now, let's just press up here so we get it again. Oh, might have to refresh the page. Okay, let's try one more time. Yeah, so now I can grab that button if I like. And if I want, I can then say add event listener and say when this button is clicked, take the event and then say window.location.href is equal to, I don't know, badsite.com. Oh, it's event listener singular, not plural. All right, so now look at what happens when I click on this button. it now takes me to another website. And now check this out. Let's go back again. I'm going to press up to get that code and then copy it. So I've copied that code now, and let's create a message here that says button on click. So when this button is clicked, run that code, and then we'll call this button maybe like, does this work for you? I don't know, something to try and trick that person to press the button. Right, so notice that this entire thing has been escaped by Quasar. Quasar now, by default, makes sure that this is safe. However, look at the old version of our application here. If I go out of here and I cd into Quasar, upgrade app, and then go into the original, let's open that in code. And there we go. Jump out of full screen, whack that on the side, and let's say Quasar dev. So this is opening the original version of the application. Okay, here it is. Let's jump into get started, jump into the chatbot, paste it in there, and now it's showing up as a button. That's not cool. That shouldn't happen. And if I click on that button, I'm like, oh, it doesn't look like it's working for me. And then I say, no, not working. Send it. Oh, hang on. We need an ID for the send button. Here we go. I'm almost done. So let's just go to bot, the page for the bot, and q-button. And what was the ID we decided on again? It was send button. ID equals send button. Oh, and it looks like I put this on the wrong button. All right, q-button, and it's the one with send. Here it is here. That's the correct button. So now, if I try and send a message, and let's just open up the console here, and there's the code. And now we say button on click, paste that code in, close it off, and then we say something like, does this work for you? And then I click on this button thinking, oh, no, it's not working for me. No. And then I click on send. It now takes me to this other site. Now, this is a pretty benign example. There's some pretty bad things you can do with an XSS attack. By the way, that's what this is called, an XSS attack or cross-site scripting attack. All right, so not cool. Just wanted to point that out to you. So let's get out of here now, go back to our original application, and this is good. So by default, you cannot do that in the new version of Quasar. In order to allow different styling, so notice that up here, I've got a strong tag. In order to allow that styling, we need to add in a custom attribute. I'll show you what I mean. So let's search for the word strong. So this is where I'm using the strong tag, and this is text that I've hard-coded myself. So I know that I can trust this text. It's not coming from somebody else. It's something I put in my code, and therefore I believe I can trust it. So let's come in here and say v dash, and let me just double check what it is over here. For text sanitize, you have to say text-html. So text-html, save it. Might have to refresh the page after that. And there we go. Now it comes up bold, which is what we want. We can also start removing all of these places where we say sanitize. So what I might actually do is just search for the word sanitize in my application. And it turns out that's the only place that I'm using it. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And now I believe we're ready to move on. But just to summarize there, by default, you are protected. Everything is sanitized by default. If you would like things to not be sanitized, then you need to specify. Once again, I think this is a smart move by Quasar. It means that you're less prone to making mistakes when you're building your application. So let me just come down here, get rid of that, and we can move on. Now, I don't have an example for QDate because this breaking change actually occurred a few versions back. Read this if you're using QDate in your app, but it's highly unlikely you'll be affected by this. It's just the deprecation of the changed prop here. So if that affects you, go ahead and read that, and you can make the change yourself. Kind of didn't make sense in this video. This, once again, is where we've removed the append property, which is a view router thing. I've already searched for append throughout my entire application, so I know that I haven't been affected by this. I'm not going to cover QForm because this is actually an addition. It's not a breaking change. So it's just something cool that they've added in. And this will be exciting for those of you that have to do some advanced validations with forms. But that kind of goes way beyond the scope of this video, so we can move on again. Right, so QImage has been changed from the ground up, so it's just basically cooler. There's not a lot of deprecations, but we've got a couple here. So remove properties, transition, basic, and what else? Change property no default to no spinner. So let me just search for image in my application. Image. Looks like this is a very dumb version of the image. I'm basically literally just setting the source, so that won't be affected. Let's create some more room here. And the other time I'm using it is in index. Here we go. So notice I'm using no default spinner there. We're changing that from no default spinner to just no spinner. Okay, let's have a look at what happens. I just want to show you what that actually does so you can see this change properly. Now, by default, if I come in here and change the network setting to fast 3G, and then I come in here and clear the cache because I might actually still have that image sitting in the cache. Now, when I refresh the page, notice that we get a spinner on this image, even though I said no default spinner. Okay, so there's going to be two spinners that show. Just notice the one related to the image. In fact, actually, let me just come down here. Let's get rid of that loading spinner. It's so annoying. Here we go. So if I clear the cache again, refresh the page, there we go. Notice we have that spinner there. However, I was saying here, no default spinner. So that has to be changed now to just no spinner. That's what the upgrade was saying there. No default spinner is now no spinner. Okay, so let's refresh the page again. And now we don't get a spinner. It just straight away shows. And there's also some really cool features. So you should definitely go to the QImage page and check out what they've added in there. Moving on, Q pop-up edit. So I'm using this for sure. Q-pop-up. Here we go. Here's the Q pop-up edit. Let's create a bit of space here because we're going to need to spend a little bit of time fixing this one. So the update itself is actually quite simple. Notice here that vModel is modeling my model. And here we're doing the same thing. vModel is modeling my model. However, here vModel is modeling my model. And vModel here is modeling something different, scope.value. And I believe that the reason that this has changed is because it offers us some performance improvements. I'm always happy to make some changes to get some performance improvements, especially since this is something that would probably show up in large amounts in your application. So you might have like a whole list of things that can be updated with a Q pop-up edit. So performance is kind of important for this component. Now let's go ahead and make this change. So the first thing is that we've now got v-slot is equal to scope. So let's go ahead and paste that in there. The next thing is that v-model is now scope.value instead here. There we go, scope.value. And the last thing I want to do is say @keyup.enter, scope.set. So it is a little bit of extra work, but I'm happy to do the extra work for the performance gains. And look, if I'm really honest with you, whenever I want to add something like a pop-up edit, I just go straight to the docs and just copy paste stuff. You know, unless it's something I've been using again and again. So I'd probably just go to the docs, copy that, paste it in, and then start playing around from there. Don't tell anyone, that can be our little secret. So let's try this and see if it works. We'll go to Get Started, Create. I'm going to open console here, Tester, and let's change that to a whole bunch of G's. Right, so that is hitting an error. Let me just try that again so we can see that error again. This error here is actually related to Vuex and the way you use Vuex with the composition API. So there's going to be a little bit of a tangent here while I go ahead and fix this. Now, when using the composition API with Vue 3, this is not available to us anymore. So scrolling down here, notice that I'm using this all over the place. We can't do that in the composition API. So check this out. If I console.log this, save that, let's refresh the page and then add it to do, or to don't. Add something in there. Notice that it comes up as undefined. that means that we can't actually use this. And that's because setup is actually run very early in the life cycle of a Vue component, which is actually a really good thing, but in this case, it causes us errors. So let me show you how we get rid of this and basically start using things the way we're supposed to using the composition API. I'll start with the first one. At the moment, update to don't is sitting down here. So we're using map mutations to do update to don't, but we can't actually do that anymore. And just a quick side note, there's actually a plugin that allows us to use map mutations when we're using Vuex. It's called Vuex dash, let me just write it in here, Vuex dash composition dash helpers. So you can go ahead and install that package and look at how it works if you really like using this syntax. However, to keep things short, I'm not going to do that in this video. So what do we do? First of all, let's get rid of that line of code. Scrolling up, we now want to import a couple of things. So we're not using Vuex the old way. We can get rid of those and say import use store from Vuex. So that's how we use the store in the composition API. And even in other parts of our applications, I believe we can do this too. So now in order to get the store, we come to setup and we say store is equal to use store. Now we want to create a variable called update to don't and basically map it to the correct mutation. So let me show you how we do that. Const update to don't is equal to, and we're going to accept the payload in there, and then we'll say store. So we're using store here, dot commit, and the commit is to don'ts slash update underscore to don't. So this is just something that I happen to know. And then we want to send the payload through there. I should quickly show you where this is. So let's go to our mutations, and there's update to don't there. So basically we're mapping it to that method. And now we can use that directly. So let's remove this. And now update to don't is called and it sends through this payload into that function. Store.commit is called and it sends through the payload. Another way that you could do this is just use store commit directly down here. So I believe that would look something like that. That should probably still work. But anyway, we'll come back to our other example. I think I'd rather this where I basically say what my methods are up front, but you can make your own decision around that. Okay, so that should fix that problem. Let's refresh the page and see if it works. Clear the console there. And let's check if this works. Beep. Cool, we've hit a different error now. So cannot read property to don't of undefined, and that's this part here. So before, this dot to don't was basically saying, hey, I'm looking for the property to don't on the component instance. However, now we need to be more specific. So the props are passed into setup, so we can actually just do this. props.todon't.uid. I love this. I think it's so much clearer because now we can see that to don't is actually coming from a prop, which is just a little bit more transparent about what's actually happening in this code. So that should now work. Let's refresh the page. And I'm predicting that we're still going to get another error. Create that. Right, we have a new error now. $emit of undefined. So notice down here, once again, we're using this, but we can't. So how do we get emit? In order to do that, we can simply pull it out of the second argument in setup. Emit. So this actually cleans things up a little bit, which is nice. Paste it in there, save it, refresh the page. I probably don't need to do all of these refreshes, but I like to do it when I'm upgrading just to be sure. All right, and let's change this to something like beep. And there we go, we got item updated. However, it didn't actually update. So there's one more thing we still need to fix here. And I believe this has something to do with the pop-up edit component. So update value actually hasn't been updated at the moment that we're trying to change this value here. So what we can do is we can accept the title. Okay, so let me just come back up here. So handle update to don't here will have the correct value that we need. And then we grab that title and we can just paste it directly into here. So let's save it. And I believe that is now going to work. Once again, I will refresh the page. And let's check if it works. Beep. And let's see if we can change that beep to a bop. And we can. It now works. So that's how we updated everything. And we got to learn some stuff about the composition API along the way, which is kind of cool. Moving on. After Q pop-up edit. Right, so this is related to Q layout. And this specifically scrolling. So let's go to our main layout, because I'm pretty sure that's where this is. Yeah, here we go, Q layout. And I'm actually going to open up our original application as well here. Jump out of full screen, whack that on the side, Quasar dev, and we'll open the layout here as well. And I believe I'm doing a console.log here. Whoop, don't know what that was all about. Yeah, here we go. So I basically just did this as an example because it's kind of hard to show an upgrade with this. Oh, hang on, let me open that up again. It's kind of hard to do an example with this because it's just like a nuanced change within the API. Okay, let's just open this up in code again. And notice that when we do a scroll, I'm calling this handle scroll method, which is just dumping out the result there. And let's have a look at what that looks like. If I open up the console in both of these applications, and I'm just going to clear it, we'll scroll down a bit. Oh, I can't even scroll down. I'll have to go to a different page here. There we go. So let's scroll down and have a look at the data there, and scroll down on this page and have a look at the data here. Now, there's just a slight difference in the API. It looks to me like we've got delta. This has been added in. Direction is the same as it was before. Direction change looks like that's the same. Inflection point has been changed to inflection position, and that's pretty much it. So if you're using inflection position, it looks like you might have to change that to inflection point. But you can have a look at that. This is one of those things where you're probably a more advanced user if you're using these kind of like these detailed scrolling techniques. So that's that. And let's have a look at the next thing. This is an addition, so we're not going to cover that. The other one is Q scroll area. So let me just see where I'm using Q scroll area. Q-scroll-area. Here we go. It's in the horizontal to don'ts page. And when that is scrolled, we are calling this handle scroll function. And I believe that's just displaying something on the page. Let's just have a look and see. So I might just get out of that, come over here, get started horizontally. And let's see what happens when I go Control M to add a whole bunch of example data and scroll to the side. Ah, seemingly nothing. What about in the other app? I'm pretty sure I had a good example here. Maybe not a good example, but an example here. Might have to come back here and make some dummy data. Control M. There we go. Okay, and I think the problem is, let's go to that component. Oh, all right, I just need to uncomment this out here. Right, so this is something I prepared earlier. And let's do that in the other application as well. Scroll, information, uncomment that out. All right, so now it's going to be showing down the bottom there. And let's just show the difference between those two. Right, so now if I scroll from left to right, we get a little bit more information here. And this actually raises something interesting. By default, Q scroll area in the new version of Quasar works both horizontally and vertically. In the old version, you could only set it to either horizontal or vertical, whereas by default, we now have both, which is really cool. So that's why get scroll position gives us top and left, whereas get scroll position in the other version only gives us one value because it can only represent either horizontal or vertical. All right, so that's an update, and that is a breaking change, so you have to go in and fix that if it makes sense in your application. We've also got a few different values here, and you can take a look at that yourself. So that could be handy for you to know. Okay, moving on. Sorry, that one was a little bit messy. The crux of it is you just need to be able to know the difference between these two and identify if you're using them in your application. Okay, so now we've also got QSelect. The item events prop has been dropped from the options slot. Okay, this is worth reading. That information is now contained within the item props. This change is a logical result of View 3's flattening of the rendering function's second parameter. So that's because on and props have now been merged together into a single object in View 3, which has a whole bunch of benefits that I won't go into in this video. So let's close out of the old version of the application. This is the original one, so I'm going to close out of that one. Don't save. And let's look for a place where I'm using Q-select. Here's an example here, site brand color select. So let's have a look at that. That would be this one here. Currently, it is not working. Are we getting errors in the console? Yeah, it looks like it's giving us some errors as well. And it looks like we're not actually using V-on in this component. So that error is probably related to something else. I'm just going to flag that for now in my mind. Move over to main layout. We're not using V-on with this component either. And how about this one? No. All right, so this upgrade doesn't actually affect me because I'm not using V-on at all. However, if I was saying, for example, V-on is equal to listeners, in order to be able to listen to those select events, this is not the best example. In fact, really, this is something that you would probably use on this component here. Yeah, so if I was saying V-on listeners, I would no longer need to do that anymore because these listeners have now been merged into the attributes. Okay, so I'd be able to get rid of that. Oh, actually, I've made a mistake. This is related to scope.item events. All right, so it's also this line here that we can remove because once again, item events has now been merged into item props, okay? Similar to what I just showed you up here, item events is now part of item props, so I can get rid of that line of code. Am I using it anywhere else? Not in that file. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. We can get rid of it there. And we can probably get rid of it somewhere here. Okay, so it's not actually being used there. But that's how we would fix that. So any place where we're using item events here, we only need to use item props because they're merged together. Moving on. This one's really, really simple. So QTable has renamed data property to rows, and this is just to help with TypeScript. So if you're a TypeScript user and you've run into problems around having data as the name of a property on QTable, that's not going to affect you anymore, which is cool. So let's come in here and search for Q-table. There it is there. And where am I using data property? Here it is here. Instead of data, we just say rows. And that should be fixed. So let's go ahead and just check that that's fixed. I'll move it back to the old version. Go to get started. And there we go. Looks like it's not working properly. So now if I change that back to rows, it does work. There we go. That was a simple fix. QTable and QTree can no longer use the .sync modifier. Okay, this is a really cool Vue 3 upgrader that has basically become necessary in Quasar. So notice that in table, here we go, I'm saying pagination.sync. Where am I using sync? Might have to search for it in here. Let me just check. .sync. And it looks like I already fixed that. Maybe I fixed that in a previous video. But anyway, it basically means that, so here's the example here. Instead of saying pagination.sync in order to model more than one variable, okay, so I believe the way we used to do it is kind of something like this, which to me is a little bit ugly and doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why are we saying the word sync when really we're kind of just modeling another piece of data, which is pagination? Well, now we can just say v-model and then say pagination. And that is like so clear to me. And it's kind of cool because when you're doing more advanced components, so for example, at work, we have a lot of components that are using a whole bunch of other components beneath it. And we've got like a kind of master component which needs to model a lot of the data from underlying components. And that basically means that we can do that now by saying v-model pagination. And in our example, we have stuff like filters, v-model aggregators, v-model, I don't know, maybe like fields. And it means that you can have like this displaying component that can model a whole bunch of different data. This has been very, very helpful for me at work. And this to me is a much nicer syntax because that's what we're doing really. We're just modeling the pagination data. Okay, moving on. Q tooltip. Oh, by the way, that update is also for Q tree, okay? So they've also got the selected and expanded properties. So if you're using that, you'll also have to search for selected.sync and expanded.sync. Next, Q tooltip and Q menu. This is an addition, so we don't need to cover that. Q uploader. The Q uploader base component has been removed in favor. All right, so it's very unlikely that this will affect you. And if it does, you probably have the knowledge to fix it yourself. So I'll be brief with this one. Quasar and the Vue community is moving away from mix-ins. And there's a few reasons for this. Mix-ins basically just merge properties into a component. And for that reason, it's very easy to accidentally overwrite values that the mix-in needs. In other words, you need to have a lot of knowledge about the mix-in you're using to make sure you don't accidentally mess things up. Now, that's not good for big teams or mid to large sized applications. They're not very transparent and can lead to situations where you end up jumping around the code trying to figure things out. So another problem with mixins is that they're actually not as reusable as they might seem. You can't pass parameters to a mixin to change how it works. So for example, let's just say I want to have a mixin on this component. You can't do this. You can't say mixins and then say my mixin and then give it some parameters like a config. Okay, this is something that I've wanted to do a lot in my applications, but you can't do it with mixins. And so I don't want to digress too much, but we'll say that the solution to these problems is the composition API. It allows us to share code across components and replace mixins entirely. So we recommend taking the time to learn the composition API. I know I've said this a lot before. Learn the composition API if you haven't already. I promise it will be well worth your time, and you're slowly going to start seeing a whole bunch of benefits to using it in the future. So that actually takes us to the Quasar plugin section, meaning we have completely finished doing component upgrades within this application. So most things should actually be working now. I think we had like a problem here that we might need to fix in the next video. Yeah, changing the language works, so it's not all drop down. It's just that one in particular. And that's got to do with a helper function. So that's actually not component related. But all of the components should now be working. Looks like they are. This is so exciting. I've actually got an application that's virtually upgraded to Vue 3. All right, this is all like language related stuff, so it looks like that's produced a lot of problems. But anyway, I can finish the video there. In the next video, we'll start moving on to plugins, and that might actually end up being the last video. I hope so, because it looks like there isn't a lot left to do. Very exciting. All right, I'll see you in the next video where we cover Quasar directives and Quasar plugins.